Welcome back to All Day Live. From the President of the United States to political hopeful, we've even heard radio show hosts use this term paid protester. It's just really popped up in public discourse. But this is not a new idea. It's actually been around for decades and used in other parts of the world as well. Our Symone Woolridge talked to a law professor who recently studied the history of that term and how it's used. So here's their conversation.
So, Dr. Acevedo, you recently wrote an essay about paid protesters, really just digging into what this means. And also, you say it's the first of its kind to really dig into the legal implications. Can you tell us a little bit about what you found out? And are there, in fact, paid protesters out there right now?
Right. So my co-author and I conducted the study because there's no direct law or scholarly analysis on point. So we worked by analogy and we did a global literature search. We found that there are almost definitely paid protesters and a broader category of people, those who are paid to engage in some form of public demonstration. Here in the US, around the world, it happens, and it's been happening for a while. It's probably also happening less than we worry about.
And some people might ask, okay, so who's paying these people? Where does the money coming from? Where's the money coming from? Are these organizations? Are these different groups? Or are they kind of scattered from everywhere pretty much?
There is a wide range. You might have institutional actors who are supporting demonstrations or protests that align with their mission. Actually, some of the most common paid public demonstration in the US, documented paid public demonstration, occurs in the corporate zone. Astroturfing, what we think of as paid corporate lobbying, has a long history in the United States and it's funded by corporations. But you might also have individual benefactors who are seeking to support movements or messages that align with their own values. Third, you might have a group of individuals who support the message that's being advanced through public demonstration or protest, but they can't participate personally, So instead, they choose to express their support by subsidizing the train fare, the gas money, the hotel accommodations of the person who is able to get out there in the public square and support a message that they both believe in.
With your research, what did that look like for you? Like, what was your starting point and kind of where did you go from there?
We worked on two very distinct fronts. So because we wanted to do two things simultaneously, we wanted to map the landscape and develop a vocabulary for talking about this kind of activity, even in the conversation that we've had just now, the distinctions between paid protest or paid demonstration or crowd filling, all of these things haven't really been teased out. And so we wanted to just explain what paid public demonstration might actually look like, what its definitions are. But we also wanted to consider the legal implications of being paid to protest. So to do the first thing, we went as broad as possible. We did a global literature search, social sciences, humanities, as well as law, looked at whether there had been previous studies of paid public activity of this sort. And there really isn't very much. For the most part, people will anecdotally mention it, that I was doing research in Indonesia and I noticed that these people attending this rally were paid to be there. There's one or two scholarly works that we came across that actually focus a little bit more on payment, but not with the same orientation towards legal implications that we're primarily interested in, because both of us are interdisciplinary legal scholars. Then on the other front, we really dive deeply into US constitutional law doctrine to understand what the legal implications of paying somebody to protest might be as regards their constitutional rights to engage in speech and association. So we moved on both of those fronts and kind of brought them together in the article.
We keep hearing these words, paid protesters, and they're sometimes used in, some of these conversations where it's like derogatory in a sense and trying to just bring the conversation down. But this isn't something new. This is something that has been going on for a while now. And you kind of dug into the history. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so our research showed, we did a global analysis to kind of get a sense of really how widely documented and understood is this phenomenon of paying people to get out there in the public square and show support for a message. And our searches found that, either paid protesting or accusations of paid protesting or paid public demonstration, we found evidence of that in 16 other countries besides the USA, and that's likely very incomplete. We found examples of people being paid to attend election rallies in India, of critics of the government in India being accused of being paid protesters or crisis actors. We found examples from Indonesia, Nigeria, as well as several domestic examples, using the accusation of payment as a way to delegitimize somebody who is present in the public square advancing a message that they believe in has a long-standing history in this country as well.
We have even seen, some candidates or people in a political seat using, maybe paying people to be crowd fillers or something of that nature. Would you compare that to a paid protester, or is it similar in a way?
I think we need to talk about all of these forms of paid public activity, public expression together, because whether you're protesting a particular law or you're supporting a law or protesting or supporting an individual or a movement or some other development, what you are doing is showing up in the public square to convey your alignment with a particular message. Now, the thing is, that distinction doesn't matter legally when we're considering the effects of paying somebody to engage in that activity.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you, go down that lane of, does it even matter in this sense? I mean, a lot of people would say that it would, but legally, if it does, what are some of the risks here, though?
So, one of the things that my co-author and I really grappled with was the sense that we have ourselves that there is something meaningful that's missed or that's changed when you pay people to appear in the public square and appear to support a message that they may or may not, in fact, actually support. But ultimately, we just came back to the conclusion that accusations of paid protesting or paid public demonstration really miss the mark, because activity, protest activity, demonstration activity that is otherwise legal doesn't become illegal just by virtue of being paid for. Now, if that activity is illegal in some way, it's violent, it destroys property, it involves trespass, whatever, that's a different story. But it's the underlying illegality of the action that is doing the work. It's not the fact of payment itself.
And we all tend to, we've seen it, and of course, everything that has happened and transpired in Minneapolis, for instance, over the last, couple of months at this point, we kind of tend to put protesters all in the same bucket. Is there a way to differentiate the difference between a paid protester out there or someone who is not being paid?
I think we would all like to believe that it's easy to distinguish between paid protesters or rented crowds and those folks who are genuinely and sincerely out there kind of fighting the good fight for something that they believe in. But the truth is that it's not. If somebody is too spontaneous, too voluble, too excited, then does that mean that they were paid or that they were sincere? If somebody is organized, they have matching shirts and well-written signs, does that mean that they were paid to show up there with those shirts and those signs, or just that they're very well organized and they planned in advance to support this mission that they align with? It's not that easy to tell.
And with that being said, if they are paid, does that change the way that they may think? I feel like some people might think of it as, if you're being paid to be out there, you might not necessarily 100% agree with the mission, right? But is that something that you have learned through your research of if people are there being paid, do they necessarily believe in what they're there for?
I think it's really important to remember that payment can be achieving different ends. Yes, on the one hand, payment might be getting a body out into the public square that wouldn't be there if it weren't for the payment. They don't believe in the mission. They're not there to support the movement. They're there to earn a paycheck, right? That is possible. But it is also possible that payment is helping somebody who would have gone anyway, who would have participated in that rally anyway, actually participate. Because otherwise, they would have to forego a day's wages. They would have to pay for cab fare. They would have to maybe pay for representation in the event that they suffer some legal consequences. And so payment there isn't actually changing the motivation of the person involved. It's not misrepresenting the motivation of the person involved. It's just facilitating their participation in something that they wanted to do anyway.
Dr. Acevedo, what about some of the claims that there are paid protesters or large funding sources? So after some of the protests that we saw in Los Angeles last year, the FBI director, Kash Patel, said that he's going to, quote, follow the money. We have kind of heard that a lot lately. And that means, just to kind of see where the money was coming from, some of the funding for these protests. And some right-wing media outlets have pointed to billionaire philanthropist George Soros. So have you seen anything in your research, and what are your thoughts on that?
Well, so unlike the FBI director, I can't follow the money myself, so I can't speak to specific claims regarding Soros, but I think it's worth remembering that payment doesn't by itself signal a lack of sincerity, that speculations of payment remain just that, speculative, absent any documented proof, that the practice of paying people to participate in otherwise peaceful or otherwise legal public demonstrations isn't limited to one party or ideological position. There has been documented news coverage of candidate Trump in 2015 hiring paid actors for the announcement of his presidential bid, and then fourth and finally, there's no legal significance to paying people for participating in otherwise legal public demonstrations. There is nothing illegal about paying somebody to show up in the public square and wave a sign or walk down a street or chant something. There is nothing illegal about it. And this is one of the things that my co-author and I really worked hard to analyze because, again, there's no law directly on point. There's actually no scholarship directly on point. So we had to work by analogy. We thought, what does paid public presence, whether it's demonstration, rally attendance, protest activity, what does that paid public presence resemble? So we thought, could it be considered political speech? Could it be considered commercial speech? Could it simply be considered a form of artistic expression? You're working as an actor, you're appearing in the public square and pretending to be a protester instead of doing it on a Broadway stage, right? So we considered paid public demonstration activity from all of these different angles. And regardless of how we considered it, the upshot was that the fact of payment does not change the legal protections available to the person who engages in that activity, and only on political activity.